You better roll them dice. You never know if it could change your life. Take a chance, you're neither wrong or right. You never know if you don't roll them dice. You better roll them dice. You never know if it.
Matt, we are back in the world of adventure, excitement, fear, and hope, and, dare I say it, tales of Darrington Dew. It's
Yes, Rob.
It's Daggerheart, everyone. We're back.
Daggerheart Part 2/4. We're talking about the advice for dungeon masters, game masters, adversaries, world building, and campaign creation. The second half of the Daggerheart book.
And as we mentioned in our first part of this review, it is actually half of the book. Often we use that sort of loosely because many books include a GM section, but it's small. Fully half of the book is how to GM, adversaries, their campaign settings, etc. This is they have given you a lot to work with if you are a Daggerheart GM.
If you're coming from 5e, you will be blown away by
You will be so
how
delighted.
helpful
You will
this
be so
advice
thrilled.
be.
I'm thrilled. I am thrilled. The second half of this book is far better than the Dungeon Master's Guide, and it didn't cost me an additional $60 to get. So A+ already, Darrington Press.
Part of what we're going to be talking about is like the DM rules, like how to make the campaign challenging, adjudication, how to run adversaries. Like most of the DM section is not rules stuff. It's advice. It's how to build a new adversary, right? Mm-hmm. It's how to build a campaign.
I mean, the only thing I will say about that is that if you're a regular listener of this podcast, you may not find all of the sections of this book all that useful because it is some well-trodden advice. But I think
the sound of us patting ourselves on the back for given some of this advice before.
We have. That being said, I have often said that there needs to be more of this in RPG books, and you should be able to pick one up and learn how to GM. And this book approaches it the way that I would like more of them to do it. Here's everything you need if you are a first-time GM, not just the rules, but like how to do it, and presented in a what I find to be a very accessible way.
And if we're comparing it to some other Dragon Slayers, some other D&D wannabes, a lot of them, not all of them, but most of them take the approach of we're really frustrated with the bad parts of this rules system. We're going to put a lot of effort into fixing the rules, and we're not going to put any effort into telling people how to run the game because we're assuming you already know that and you're reaching out for a new system because you're good at running games, but you don't need any advice, which both Rob and I know is not true. All DMs need advice all the time. And so it's really appreciated to have not just a lengthy section of advice, but a real great set of tools for you as the Dungeon Master to use. I really enjoyed reading through the Dungeon Master section here.
So did I. It was very well written. There was some good advice, some new advice. There are some areas that are familiar and well trodden, but there are a couple areas where they've done some what I consider to be really innovative and new things. This is a really great section for experienced and inexperienced GMs. I've said this before, but it is clear that the writers and designers of Daggerheart, the people at Darrington Press, are game masters, and they are thinking about the experience of a game master when they are designing when they were designing this game. That much is clear to me.
Darrington Press has released a one-page GM guide that I think you can photocopy from the back of the book or just download from their website. It's like the little guides you give to players, but for the GM, you could put it on the back of your DM screen if you're using one of those. Half of it is specific to this system. The other half, the example GM moves and the GM principles and best practices, I think would work for most fantasy games the way most people run them. Not everyone, but I loved having this in front of me. Yeah, it's great. We'll get into the specifics, but if you're like, I'm not sold on Daggerheart, but I am interested in what they have to say about DMs, take our word for it, but also go find the GM guide, a one-pager, and see if you can get anything out of it.
Matt, they've done something that speaking of things that I consider to be innovative, something really neat at the beginning of the GM section, and they include a full example of play, an encounter with a 4-person party against a bunch of skeletons, which they handily defeat. And then it has, and like maybe this is just because of my background teaching or whatever, maybe you liked this as well, but then they had a list of questions. I really liked this. I thought this was really clever for 2 reasons. One, this is a good way to like retain information, but 2, it has a bunch of what I would describe as rulings and corner cases. How would you as the GM handle this situation, which I think is really, really smart, because it acknowledges that there's some parts of all games, but some parts of this game that are up to you to interpret, and there's more than one right way to decide how that plays out in the moment. And I thought this was really, really a great way to learn the system, but also to help GMs prepare for what they're going to experience when they're running it.
Right. It also emphasizes and doubles the reader down on the points that are most important for the game master to be like, hey, in this like 4 pages of play, these are the points where it's up to you, and it's really important what decisions you make. How would you? That we're trying to get you thinking like a Daggerheart game master. These are the best practice. These are the places to put your mental energy.
Here's a specific example. Stella allowed Rune to make 2 jumps using the Arcane Door spell rather than making him roll for each casting. When a character is using an ability like that, do you want to call for a roll for each use, or let one roll represent chaining the ability a couple of times like Stella did? This is a great example. There are a lot of things in Daggerheart that are like this. There are also things in 5e that are like this. And there's no guidance whatsoever on how you are supposed to manage situations like that. And they just come out and say it, and then say, what do you want to do? They give you, the GM, the power, and they also acknowledge that there is a decision to be made. I found this very empowering, and also it helped me understand the system better, even before going into GMing.
The example of play is brilliant. The next section, GM principles. I wanted to drill down on
this is real
what makes Daggerheart, what kind of game it is. We talked about this last episode, but let's talk about it some more.
I'm always doing this, and listeners who don't care about this will just have to bear with me, but I'm going to praise the format and layout of this section, because I really like it, and I like they do this throughout the book. But they have, in the GM principles section, they have a bulleted list of all the GM principles at the front, and then detailed subsections like throughout. It's very well organized. It's
so nice,
easy, pleasant to read. We've read so many, and so many of them are very poorly organized. I'm so pleased when they are easy to read and well organized and make logical sense. Thank you to Pathfinder 2e and Daggerheart for being comprehensible to me.
Daggerheart truly shines when the battles against adversaries are a dramatic beat and a larger, emotionally grounded story about the wants and the needs of the characters. I think this is true, right? I think that's the game system they want to set up. And I want to say 3 great things breaking that sentence down, and then 1 personal critique.
Sure.
The character creation and the background question setups and the examples for like world building, specific character creation, background questions, they're all brilliant. If you want to create characters with wants and needs, this is a great system for it. It has amazing world building advice to like build like arcs and larger stories. We'll get into that in a second. It has a solid mechanic for like dramatic battles where there's like, yeses and ands and no's and buts, all those things. The thing that is absent from the system is, again, it says a larger emotionally grounded story, there's nothing in the game system about like how to ground your characters emotionally. There's nothing emotional to fill the rules. We're talking about hope and fear are the time, but they don't have any emotional meaning for the player characters. The one thing that I think kind of becomes clear as you read the GM section is that you have to fill in those things with your fear and stuff like that, right? There's no examples that are like, make this about your character's emotions, but I think that's the like one piece of advice that's missing here if you want to accomplish what it's saying it's setting out to accomplish, if that makes sense.
That does make sense. This is where the DNA of Powered by the Apocalypse or Fate is clear in Daggerheart, but where the specific mechanics that exist.
Right, they filled it in with frog DNA from 5e.
Because in like Fate, it specifically works like that. Like, here's a move, and here's how you're going to specifically tie that to like the larger emotional or narrative, arc of this story. And I think intuitively,
right, a Powered by the Apocalypse game, masks. You check a thing. Your character is angry now.
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
It's mechanical. And I think players will intuitively understand how this works, but I think it's a fair critique that in other systems, what they are describing is mechanical, and there are not precisely mechanics for linking your character's like emotional journey to the action at hand, which is okay, but I think you're right to point out that there's like a little bit of a disconnect here. I have one good and one bad thing to say about the sentence as well, which is a very rich text, Matt. Mm-hmm. It is basically an elevator pitch and a mission statement about the game, and I really like that because it tells you what type of game Daggerheart wants to be. Too many games are trying to be everything or refusing to sort of like commit to like what it wants to be. And I think it's important to say this is the type of game that this system is built for. The thing that I found a little unclear about the sentence is also about the emotionally grounded part, but a different take on it. And maybe this is just the language in question, but the impression that I get from Daggerheart is that it is a game of literal melodrama, that it is one of high emotions and dramatic happenings and intense, perhaps almost even ridiculous displays of heroism or terror and sadness. And I would not describe the way that I intend to approach Daggerheart as emotionally grounded. There are emotions in it. They are not grounded emotions. They are high drama, but that might just be a quibble about the precise term and not what they're describing.
Two things building on that is I think the emotion and drama is supposed to come from these non-mechanical parts, the player background questions, the world building, the campaign you build, just like you would in a game of 5e, right? This is where the actual play influences things. And the second thing was really important, but I forgot what it was.
It was about emotionally grounded,
emotionally grounded. I think what the advice I'm gleaning here is that you're supposed to create characters that have superhuman, supernatural missions and powers and quests, but at the end of the day, they're supposed to act like normal people.
Supposed to have
right?
feelings.
This is not.
Yeah,
they're supposed to have feelings. They're not going to be a character in a Zack Snyder superhero film,
right.
Whose feelings are they're gods.
Are immaterial,
can't
right?
understand
them. Their motives
They're
are
Marvel
incomprehensible to us, right? Yeah. No, they are human beings with emotions. Yes, that makes sense, and that is a good thing to focus on for Daggerheart. Let's talk about the GM principles, though.
Yes. So a lot of these are familiar to people who have played Dungeon World or Apocalypse World or similar games, right? They are begin and end with the fiction, collaborate at all times, fill the world with life, wonder, and danger, ask questions and incorporate answers, make every role important, play to find out what happens, hold on gently.
Just as they were in Dungeon World or Powered by the Apocalypse. This is still good advice. It's modified a little bit for Daggerheart, but it's fundamentally the same. And these are good principles to follow if you're trying to be a collaborative GM telling a story with your players and not a adversarial GM trying to kill their PCs.
The one that I think is not that big of a deal compared to some of the other ones, but is the biggest change from if you're coming to this from 5e is like making every roll important, right? Is that getting in the mindset of every time you let the players roll the dice, something in the fiction should change.
I understand why this is in there, but I have expressed this before, especially in our dice mechanics episode, that what I like about Daggerheart and what I like about a lot of games, or what I'm interested in exploring in games, is where the dice rolls themselves drive the action forward. And what's cool about Daggerheart is every roll does something. You get hope, you get fear, you advance a countdown, you flip it over to the GM. You should be encouraging, in my opinion, more rolls. And I do think it is important not to like just frivolously have players roll the dice, but like unlike something like Mothership, where every roll has a significant chance of stress and panic, every roll here, something interesting is going to happen. So if players want to roll, they should roll. I think you should encourage more rolling in Daggerheart. I think it's a great system for, you want to roll for that? Go for it. I think it's one that it encourages that type of behavior.
You're not having players make a roll to see something or a perception check, and they fail. It's like, well, you don't see it, you're going to continue on. If you fail with hope, another opportunity to find out what's going on will present itself. If you fail with fear, the situation is getting worse in some other way. They're being stalked by this ravenous beast, and now dusk is settling and it's getting dark. Okay, yeah. The situation changes, the fiction moves forward.
Yeah.
GM best practices. So these are like
practices, yes.
Putting those principles into play.
There are more of these, and they are cultivate a curious table, gain your players' trust, keep the story moving forward, cut to the action, help the players use the game, create a meta conversation, tell them what they would know, ground the world in motive, bring the game's mechanics to life, reframe rather than reject, and work in moments and montages.
One that I can't remember if it was in the playtest, but it's definitely not in the like inspirations that this one's drawing from, as far as I can remember, that I really love is work in moments and montages. Mm-hmm. And it's just like a great little piece of advice to have. Do I want this role, this action, this scene to represent a single pivotal, important moment? Elmer Fudd here. Or do I want this to be like, okay, you're gathering information and you stop by every seedy bar in town, and then finally you find the answer right about this. This is a montage of things, right?
Yeah.
I love that.
This was a major growth moment for me as a GM and as a writer as well, was that learning that not everything in a story has to be depicted. You grow
this
up.
This is the Birdemic rule, Rob. Have you ever seen the film Birdemic?
Yes.
They show every time a character gets in a car, goes to a new location,
yes.
even if it's a location they've already been to, gets out of a car, you gotta show it, right? Or it didn't happen.
It didn't happen. A mistake a lot of amateur writers make will be like, and then Sarah got up and walked across the room and placed her hand upon the doorknob and then opened the door and stepped into the hallway, and then she proceeded down the hallway. You don't have to do any of that. You don't have to do any of that. And TTRPGs work the same way. I mean, I think once again we have Tolkien to thank and blame for this, because he is a very ponderous writer who likes to describe everything that happens in between, one point and another, especially since it's mostly travel narrative, and he just wants to describe the, rolling green heather of England. But as it turns out, when telling a story in any format, there's a lot of stuff that doesn't need to happen on screen per se. And an important trick to learn as a GM that we've talked about before is knowing when to say, okay, yeah, you do it, or here's a montage, like Matt said. Here's the things that you see, but we're not going to stop in every single merchant stall. Some players really want to take their time and to talk to everyone, and you can indulge that or not. But I find these days, more often than not, there are lots of parts where I'm just going to describe what happens to get to the interesting stuff, to get to the action, which doesn't mean combat, right? That means here's an important conversation, or here's a difficult moment or important decision. But we don't need to be spending a lot of time just meandering or describing unimportant things.
The great example after this one just sort of shows like this is a great, working in a montage is a great opportunity to bring your players into the collaborative fiction. Well, to find out about the Scorpion Society, you'll need to head to several crowded taverns. Tell us what that looks like, and we'll make one roll for the whole thing.
Yeah, which is perfectly fine. And if there's anything that needs to be played out, you can play it out, but you don't have to describe this part of the game in great detail. This is all of the best practices in here are linked to this, or many of them are. Cut to the action, keep the story moving forward. This is important stuff. This is good advice that GMs are not often getting in other games, and I think it's important to emphasize.
The other one I wanted to highlight is just grounding the world in motive. I think it's a great way to use this system. Your PCs, if you guide your characters through player creation for your specific campaign pitch, are going to have motives and wants. If you give your NPCs motives and wants, the story in many ways begins to carry itself.
Yeah.
So
we've talked about this before, and especially when it comes to, we'll talk about adversaries or combat, it is important to treat them as beings with motives. They often, combats in games like these can just end up being, slugfests with faceless enemies, but they can be people or monsters with specific desires. They can be as simple as they're hungry, but, not everything should just be a mindless automaton that fights until it's defeated.
Right. This works for, more human-like NPCs as well. There's also a section right after these two, which is pitfalls to avoid. Undermine the hero. Yeah, undermine the heroes. Avoid undermining the heroes. Always telling the players what to roll, letting scenes drag, singular solutions, overplanning, and hoarding fear. Which one of these do we want to highlight, Rob?
I have two. Well, the last three are my favorite, and I'll tell you why these I think are the biggest pitfalls that are, and I'm glad that they're calling them out. Singular solutions is an easy mistake to make, and we talk about this a bunch, especially when we're talking about puzzles or running mysteries. You know everything, right? You as the GM know everything. You wrote or read the adventure, right? And it can be very easy to forget what it looks like when you don't know everything. And if you are waiting for the players to come up with the solution, even if it seems incredibly obvious to you what they are supposed to do, that can be a real issue. And so bearing in mind that there are lots of potential solutions and not pinning your hopes on like one singular solution is a very important thing to do, important thing to learn how to do early so you don't fall into this trap. I also think that this relates very closely to overplanning, where you do too much and you expect your players to follow a specific path and they don't, and then everybody's unhappy. This also links to like hold on gently, right? Like prepare situations, prepare events, prepare NPCs, but don't prepare the whole scenario. And plan out a flowchart. Be willing to be flexible. Be willing to jump or skip or drop things if needed. It's good advice. And then I really like the hoarding fear one because that's very specific.
The fear one's it's similar in a way too. It's like if you're always hoarding your fear for your perfect, precious encounter, then sometimes you're not holding on gently. You have this stockpile of fear. If the players have made decisions where this is actually a way more dramatic scene, spin that fear right now.
We talked about this in our metacurrencies episode, but one thing that I think is important that is one of the more challenging things about it is encouraging players to spend it. And Daggerheart has some Elmer fudding myself. Daggerheart has some really good mechanics for encouraging players to spend their hope, but not so many for the GM to spend their fear. And so
It's really up to you.
Yeah, you have to be a little bit more proactive about this. So I think I'm glad that they're calling it out in this section.
Unlike other GM metacurrencies like Threat in the 2d20 system, you're getting fear, again, 45% of the time that players roll the dice.
You have a lot. You should spend it.
You're always going to have like a little bit. There's not the same guidance as in some GM metacurrency systems. It's like if the GM doom pool is huge, that means things are dire. And there's not that sort of advice here. It means things could be dire at any moment. And so unless you want that to be the case, don't get up to 12 fear unless you're specifically planning for a climactic battle.
Yeah.
Immediately going to happen in the next scene.
Right.
Based on some of the rules for like adversaries or environments, there's nothing stopping you. In fact, the game is encouraging you to be just like, you enter the temple of bad things. I gain 6 fear.
Right.
Now let's have a big fight.
There's a lot of mechanics. They're like, this environment gives me X number of fear. Yeah.
Man, I want to talk about environments, but
sorry, I'm jumping ahead. I'm excited about those too. Yeah.
Yeah. No, there's a bunch of advice on how to run adversaries, when to call for action rolls, a bunch of, just general how to use the system as the GM. I love that it's as lengthy as basically the player section on how to play their characters. One thing that I thought was really, really important if you're coming to a system like this from something like 5e, which is avoid undermining success, right? I think the trickiest one to do in that yes, no, but, and system is the yes, but, because the thing you have in your mind, at least I have in my mind, is, oh, you failed the roll. That means you failed. The bad thing, the but is the thing you didn't want to happen is happens, right? The example is someone sneaking through something. They succeeded. They were very stealthy, but the alarm goes off and more guards arrive. That's not, that's undermining their success with the but, and it encourages you to think outside the box of the consequence. It doesn't specifically say this, but this is a great time when a player succeeds to hand the narrative control to them. You get where you want to go, but there's a new complication. What is it? Throw it out to the table.
So, building on that, do we want to talk about these example GM moves next? Because this is the next big section. And I think when I was talking about some things that they're innovative about this system, this is one of them. And I actually expect that this section may be divisive, but longtime listeners will know that one of my complaints about story-focused, fiction-focused games is that it places a lot of pressure on the GM to be improvisational, to come up with clever solutions for those yes but or no but or yes and things, right? If in something like Blades in the Dark you have a partial success, you have to be like, well, what does that mean? And there are Blades in the Dark as a so-so example because it's pretty good about guiding you to like what should happen in a partial success, but this is still on you to decide. And what Daggerheart has done, and you don't have to use all of these, you don't have to use just these moves, but here are some examples of things that can happen if there's a success with fear or a failure with hope. Here's
or
a
you
whole
just
list.
Want to spend a fear because you feel like it's the right time.
Now's the time to spend a fear. Here's a move. And I think this doesn't cover everything that you would do as a GM, but it's a really good menu of options.
Right. I love the advice that says use this menu when like the conversation stalls out. When players just kind of look to you like, that's your cue. Okay, and then this happens. One of my favorite ones is basically get real hard real fast. Just take away an opportunity permanently. Right?
Yes.
That way out of the dungeon is closed. There are still 3 other ways, but things like just got worse.
I really like, and this I think shows the dramatic actual play roots of Daggerheart, but one of my favorites is Spotlight and Adversary, and it's basically giving your bad guy a big bad moment, maybe like a big fancy attack, or they stand up and shout, or dramatically throw back their cloak or something. I love this one. Great use of fear. I can see myself using this all the time. There's a bunch of really really good ones here.
Right. Spotlight and Adversary could just be combat, right? Mm-hmm. Just the GM taking their turn in combat, but, in a non-combat situation, which, again, this game, I think, flows really well from combat to not combat. The rules work very similarly. It's just the time scale that changes. You can absolutely spotlight an adversary, right? Show that the world is doing something. My other favorite one is... signal something bad is going to happen, right?
Yeah,
that dragon flies overhead.
What's cool to me is you could ignore this. You could ignore all of these. These are all things that you can just do as a GM in most games. But I kind of like tying them to your GM resource. I kind of like the mechanic of being like, I'm going to spend a fear to show you that there's an assassin, hiding behind the the divide in this room, or I'm going to spend a fear to have your faithful ally be kidnapped in the night. I think that mitigates some of the potential for frustration, and also, I don't know, maybe I just got a numbers brain. It just helps me sort of like adding a little bit of structure to it means that I don't have to do quite so much. Oh, is now the right time? Have I built this up correctly? Have I justified this? I'm like, well, I've got fear. I'm going to use it to do one of these things.
Right. And correct me if I'm wrong, you don't have to spend a fear.
You don't.
If the player rolled with fear.
That's right.
You get
That's
a fear, but it's just your turn now to do something. And again, on the other end, we can take away an opportunity or something like that. On the softer end, you can are things like, just ask everyone a question, right? And then we're going to go with what your answer is. Like,
some of these are neutral or fun.
What about this place tells you someone else was here before you? While the players look at those clues, you can come up with who that person was. Others are like, use a PC's backstory against them, or...
Some of these are more neutral or just dramatic fun, like shift the environment or show how the world reacts. Something... You're taking this opportunity to show that circumstances are changing. It's not necessarily bad. It just means the drama is getting ratcheted up. I love that.
Yeah, I think a couple of these moves here touch on when Daggerheart succeeds at telling an emotionally grounded story about the wants and the needs of the characters, right? If you are employing these couple moves that really touch on that part of the game, that's where it's going to succeed. There's and you're going to have to rely on your own exegenic and your player's own exegenic skills at telling emotional stories and deciding what those things are. Again, it's that actual play frog DNA spliced into this fiction first game. Again, I think that's what most people want, but it is a little tricky. But this is where you go to for that.
Yeah. It's a really great section.
What do we want to talk about? Do we want to talk more about fear, about the other DM advice?
I feel like we should move briskly. I do want to
provide
effusive praise, though, for one section here. And there's a chart. There's several charts of example difficulty, which is things like agility. If you are trying to sprint within close range to through enemies, it's a 20, or if it's harder than that, it's a 25. It has this for lift, smash, hide, recall, perform, all these things. So many games don't have this. Matt, I still don't really have a good sense of difficulty ratings in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. I mean, I can just sort of like instinctually throw them out, but I'm like, I don't know what hard is. Is that a 10, a 15, a 13, somewhere in there? This gives you, again, this is just 2 pages. Why doesn't every book have this? Is the question that I'm asking.
Well, it wraps back to the elegance in that each of the 6 ability scores is described by just these 3 words.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And you can extrapolate out from there, but it really, it all circles.
It all works
back.
nicely together. Yeah, it all fits together very, very, very delightfully.
Again, it's like poetry, so if they rhyme.
Thank you, George.
I wanted to highlight a couple quick things about the rest of the DM section, like rapid fire. There's some example rules for social conflict. It suggests use the NPC stress mechanic and checks affecting that. I think that's fine.
It's okay.
I much prefer the sort of like leverage or motivation system, but this can work quite similarly. I absolutely love, and anyone for any game can steal the table of objectives for armed combat, right? It's things that this is not your goal to just kill everyone. What's going on in addition to the deadly violence?
It's a great chart.
It also, I think, has some of the best campaign and character session 0 advice. All of the advice that you've seen in other rule books about session 0 and cats and safety tools and like what players want to get out of the game is here. I think there's a great emphasis on you making the pitch first and then how to make that pitch. And then, hey, by the way, here's 5 great examples of pitches.
There's a really cool there's one page on your session 0. There's a really cool single page on running a one shot. There's, like Matt said, there's a bunch of advice on pitching, on running a campaign. And when we talk about this, I mean like the fundamentals of like getting it running, including like how to present it as well as like how to design it and how to think about it. This is not the most detailed thing that we have read. We have read some really like great advice on how to build out a whole campaign, but it's a much more holistic view of how to run games. I think it's really useful advice. I think it's really, really useful advice, especially if you haven't run a game before, but even if you have.
The 6 pages on running a campaign are not the best campaign building advice that like I have in my brain, but for specifically what you're trying to do, which they put a lot of emphasis on making the campaign really centered around players' wants and needs and backstories. This is really good. The example, really good. Like it's a example of play, but it's an example of prep, which we don't often get. And it's like, here are the player backstories you got. Let me write thinking aloud through how I would incorporate those backstories into this specific campaign pitch. It's brilliant stuff.
It's really good. They have an example of a sample story arc, and it's brief, but it's an example of a 3-act structure, a story arc. And then they have a really cool another chart. I love charts of these 3 arcs and how you would break them down by session and how you would overlap the sort of like A plots and B plots and C plots so that, this is stuff I kind of do off the cuff in my games. I never even thought about trying to like map it out, and I'm going to now. This is right. Such a great example of how to plan. It's like a 12 session campaign, but this is such a great example and such good advice. I really liked this part.
Yeah, like when I feel like Rob, no No shade on us. We're great GMs, but when we do this, it's a happy accident.
Yes, yes.
Based on muscle memory of years of GMing. But if we actually try to plan for this,
in case it's not clear, we make a lot of stuff up as we go along. And I Matt, I don't know about you, I'm always trying to get more organized and be a little bit more, think a little bit further ahead and be a little bit better about planning these moments instead of just letting them happen. So it is always really cool to see people approach it not from we're winging it based on muscle memory. This is really smart stuff, in my opinion, from the running a game perspective.
Yeah. The other great thing this section does, absolute masterclass here, is that it also shows you when you should ask questions of yourself and when to kind of write those questions down and come up with answers, and when to just kind of leave those as questions because you're getting too far ahead of yourself, right? You're like, hey, we got to figure out, what will happen when we get here. We can start thinking about those things, but we don't want to write down an answer yet because, we haven't even started playing.
Yeah.
Perfect. That's such good advice.
It's good advice, yeah.
There's a bunch of stuff on adversaries, on how to build them for yourself, on how to build environments. I love that almost all these fit on little cards.
That's really cool.
The only thing I want to mention, again, which is just I got to have a critique of a system or I don't feel like I'm doing my job before we move into the example campaign pitches, is if I was running this and I want my players to be emotionally grounded and about their wants and needs, I would lean into the downtime moves to make them about specific parts of their backstory, or maybe write myself one more, even more specific GM move that's like play on your character's wants and needs or something like that, and just be like, spending a fear, there's something you want here. Tell me what it is, or maybe I have an idea what it is. And then this will add that complication here, right? And that's what I sort of see in games like Critical Role that they make, that the DMs are often doing. They're being like, here's a thing that your character wants that's a complication. And so that's how I'm going to try and make this system, at least at my table with my players, live up to its goals.
Yeah, I agree with that.
In fact, thinking more fiction first, I definitely have a an outline started. We'll have to save it for some Patreon episode. It's just titled "Someone in Camp Still Wishes to Speak with You" for improving.
This is a good idea.
Player with player role playing scenes, right?
Yeah.
To have that emotional camp thing.
Yeah,
so,
we'll have to
tell I've been playing Baldur's Gate.
Yeah, we'll have to do more of this because even before Baldur's Gate, we had mentioned, and it's been a thing that using downtime effectively and creating those camp scenes or those travel scenes where players get to like talk to each other. That is a challenge, but also like a fun one. We'll do another episode on this. Go
ahead.
The adversaries, I really like.
Yes,
and
sorry.
No, it's okay. We shouldn't spend a whole lot of time on them, even though I want to. They're really cool. I also have to sort of like level a critique at this section, even though I actually really like it. The designing encounters achieves what I think 5th edition's XP budget wishes it could do. It's so simple.
Battle points,
right? So your battle points, and this is so simple, folks. 3 times the number of PCs in combat plus 2, right? Super simple. Yeah. However, they then immediately go and make it complicated. Not like super complicated, but more than it needs to be. And I'm going to just like as an example, some factors might increase or decrease your battle points budget. Subtract 2 points if you're using 2 or more solo adversaries. Okay. Add 1 point if you don't include any bruisers, hordes, leaders, or solos. This isn't like that complicated, but like that's one of those floating rules that you're going to forget about if you're just like looking at points values for all of your baddies, right? It's not necessarily intuitive that you're going to adjust your points up and down based on the types of enemies that you have. It's also it tells you like what each type of enemy is worth, but it's just be like a big number on every card that says this is a 2 battle point enemy or something. It's fine. It's not a big deal.
This could be solved by putting the like number of points as like little dots next to their tier number, so that when you're just moving the cards around on your table and matching them together, you would just need this page in front of you. Because I'm guessing what happened in like playtesting is like if you put 2 solos in a battle, that makes it really, really
it makes it real
deadly.
tough. Yes, that makes sense.
So we got to add an extra thing for this. They can't just be 5 points each. But not having the point costs on the cards is tough.
In general, it's really easy to use. It's super easy and fun to plan encounters. I think I mentioned in our preview episode that I didn't like that you rolled a d20 for adversaries instead of a d12. I wanted it all to be the same die. I've come around. I think I now understand the idea behind it. It makes things simpler mathematically from the GM side, and I'm now for it. I really like the adversary section. It is sort of like boiled down to just what you need. Mothership does the same thing. It does not stop you from having interesting enemies or interesting encounters. I think this is great.
Yeah, adversaries are great. I love the format of the cards. I love the motivations and the descriptors and the special moves. We've avoided the need for adversary stats beyond their HP, stress, and damage thresholds, because we can just have their attack value, and then we can just have usually one experience that's like, well, if you want to give them a bonus to a roll, this is the rolls it will apply to. Spin to fear if you want to add it. And that I think works great.
We need to talk about the campaign pitches, but we must talk about environments first. We just have to talk very briefly about environments, and then we don't need to spend a lot of time on this. The basic point, though, is that environments function much like adversaries do, and that they are basically a card that you can add to an encounter that comes with a difficulty, some features, potential adversaries you might find there, etc., so on and so forth. I think you could probably avoid using these. You don't need them, but I think they're a really useful tool. I think they're a really cool thing to just sort of like be, this fight is happening at the abandoned grove or the bustling marketplace, etc.
This is a great example of like how to prep mechanically for Daggerheart. Like, for example, one of them is like, the Imperial Palace. Any check where players are not like following the mores of this imperial court is at disadvantage, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just like that's a great way to think about a place where there's probably going to be social encounters, and that's what you want to emphasize. And then of course there's like more action oriented encounters as well.
Yeah. Anyway, these are very cool idea. This is one of those innovative things that I was talking about. This is a really great addition. The way that it's laid out makes it really easy to use. This is good stuff.
The flexibility of encounters is also, they can be for a scene or like a session or a journey, right? I'm going to write a couple rules or preferably just steal some from existing encounters for this whole dungeon or this whole ship journey. And then maybe I'll add some specific ones for this interesting action piece.
Okay, now let's talk about campaign frames, because this is one of the coolest things that is in the entire book, and we're not gonna be able to do it justice, but it's this is great. So
Rob mentioned last episode on Daggerheart that there's no starting adventure, but I have to say, for a campaign rule book, especially when there's a free PDF of a starting adventure elsewhere, this is way better, because it flows so naturally from their advice on building campaigns to here's how we put those exact steps into practice in 5 radically different ways. The Witherwild, Ancient Forest versus Invading Nation, 5 Banners Burning. It's Game of Thrones. Beast Feast. It's Dungeon Meshy. Age of Umbra, Gods Are Dead, Dark Souls. Motherboard, it's Numenera, but very specific. You're coding and building robots and fighting robots. And then Colossus of the Drylands, it's Wild West meets Shadow of the Colossus. Gods are rising, and yeehaw! An old prospector has uncovered the spawn of Arcananex.
Yeah. So what they've done here, this is one of those things. I've never seen anything like this in my life. This is brilliant. Instead of giving you one campaign setting, they've basically given you 5 pitches, we'll call them. But that really doesn't do it justice because it's several pages for each, and it's a lot of vibes. It is like critical information, but it gives you just enough to like start a campaign, but leaves you lots of room to improvise. And there's 5, like we mentioned, and I have to say, this is unfair of me, but based on when we read Wildmount and just like my and also like with Candela Obscura, I was not really expecting a lot in terms of lore when it came from Daggerheart, and that was always going to be fine with me. I was blown away by all of these. These are
really good.
They're all really good. None of them is like completely original, but every single one of them is a new twist on an old idea or a not that old idea done masterfully. Each of these would be a totally like fresh and unique campaign. Like we said, Wild Myth, Witherwild it's like Ghibli, but with invading colonial armies. The Banners Rising is probably the most generic one, but it is a great setting for any sort of like high drama campaign. They're all really well done. There's a ton of information. There's characters. There's settings. There's maps. It's phenomenal. So
last episode we said that Daggerheart is not good at specific types of play, and no game that's truly good is great at every type of play. And we establish in this episode, by just reading the book, what Daggerheart truly shines at, right? Battles against adversaries, a dramatic beat, and a larger, emotionally grounded story about the wants and needs of the characters. I also think they're trying to show off while showing you, hey, these 5 different settings, one, Ghibli inspired, another a dungeon crawl where you eat the monsters, another high fantasy Game of Thrones, another techno magic in a giant computer, is that while we didn't cut any classes or communities or ancestries, we gave you advice on, here's 5 systems that you can use the game out of the box with like a 1-page add-on module to show its flexibility and what its high fantasy can be. And if you want to be more specific than that, hey, just make some additions or cut parts of the game that don't work, and then boom, you add another little add-on module just like we did. Perfect.
And each of these campaign frames, again, it's mostly vibes, touchstones, but they all have a unique mechanic, at least one. Sometimes they're minor. Sometimes, the Game of Thrones one is just, here's some factions, but they're cool factions, and the mechanic is a good one. And sometimes it's a lot more complicated. The Motherboard one, the new Monero one, replaces like a whole bunch of things, and like you can build companion robots. There's a whole
it's like,
conlang.
Hey, magic. There's no magic here. You're just using technology that you don't understand, right?
And this addresses that observation, that objection that Matt and I raised last episode. This sort of like, it's more than just like a mod or like a paint job. Like each of these, like you said, Matt, demonstrates the flexibility of the system by being like, here's some modest changes. Now you're playing a very focused game. Now you're playing Dark Souls. Now you're playing Numenera. Now you're playing Horizon Zero Wild or whatever. To me, it works. This is brilliant. This is really interesting stuff. I never considered that you could, when I'm thinking about campaign books, I'm like, well, how can I communicate as much information as possible in as little space as possible? But like, I gotta be more detailed, not less. But this is great. I'm super impressed by this section.
It's also just teaching by example. Like if you can put together a frame, like one of these, you're not completely ready to go, but you're more than 50% of the way there. And then
it basically gets you to the point where you're doing the nuts and bolts. You're planning actual sessions, right? You have all the like, you're not having to like figure out where all the nations are and like what they speak. You're like, okay, session 1, we're here, and you'll have to make up some stuff yourself, but you've got all the like big picture information. I would happily run or play in any of these. There are a couple that are obviously more exciting to me than others, but I was, like I said, I was not expecting to like this at all. I was super impressed.
Yeah. Can we spend 2 minutes talking about each one?
Yeah. Yes.
The Witherwild, okay, it's Princess Mononoke. It's also got gods like in Exalted that are just kind of wandering around out in the forest. There's a collapsing imperial civilization and a bunch of overgrown wilds stuck in eternal spring. People are dying from a sickness. There's kind of all these
plague. Yep.
Factions. I think this one is like great for if you want to have that like Legend of Zelda that you know what game doesn't do that? Well, Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah.
However, this campaign frame absolutely does. I really like the Witherwild because I think a lot of people will like it. It's by Carlos Cisco, Roan Hall, and Spencer Stark.
I think this one is really cool. I know that it's not. I know that it's been done, but I do love a colonial nation invades a magical land. I think that's a great setting for a very
It's
fun...
been done, but it's specific enough that it's new.
Yeah.
You know?
And they're growing these magical flowers and they're cultivating them. It's very I immediately like know what kind of campaign I would run in this, and it would be fun to play. Like this is it's great. I love this. It's not too Ghibli. Like you can, the influence is like obviously there, but like, it does what those other things that we complain about doesn't do. It takes inspiration from, and I think fundamentally understands Ghibli better than a lot of its imitators, because this is a very tragic setting. This is great. I loved this one.
I really liked Five Banners Burning by Mike Underwood, which is the next campaign.
Friend of the pod, listener,
Friend of the
and
pod.
member of the Discord. Hi, Mike.
Oh, hi, Mike. And I like it because, okay, the inspirations are obvious, but the specific world building is, what if every, competing nation wasn't just the same, feuding aristocratic house? What if each one had a real flavor, like mercantile magocracy,
Yes.
Theocracy, revolutionaries, and then of course I think the inciting incident is obvious. The players are in like a scheme where something is going on up to you that's gonna either start or prevent a war, and everyone's got their agents out looking for the people that are the MacGuffin. And this is one of those games frames where if you put this in front of your player, you might get back, hey, I want this to be about like war. And you're like, perfect. And no, I want it to be about intrigue or something like that. And I think this frame would work, really well for either one. This one had my favorite map too. So
That's a great map. Yeah. The key thing that it does here is that it has 5 factions that are all very unique, and I think compelling in their own way. There's no like obvious, these are the evil schemers. I can see players like wanting to throw their lot in with any one of these, which I think is interesting, right? Like it's going to create a lot more of a compelling intrigue faction type game if the players, like if there's an obvious enemy, if they're all being courted by interesting dynamic factions with distinctions among them, not just these are the rich nobles. These are the nobles from the Riverlands. These are the nobles from the cold place. Sorry, George R. R. Martin. Like it's again taking advantage of the fantasy setting to be like, here's some fantastic nations, with different roots and strengths and origins.
this would be one that it'd be like, hey, players could end up building their own nation or something like that out of this. This was the first one that I read that I was like, that first one, Witherwild, I wouldn't cut anything from the game. This one, I don't know, I may get rid of ancestries or something like that. It doesn't seem important, and ancestry has a player connotation just in the world we live in to nation. So you could obviously not need to cut that, but I would if I was running that.
All of these are, but I think that's what's cool about these campaign frames is that because they're so loosely held, I think it's very easy to be like, I'm going to cut or add any given part, and it still, I think, like works very well.
Yeah. The next one is Beast Feast by Banana Chan, Rowan Hall, and Spencer Stark. And obviously, I think the number one inspiration is Delicious in Dungeon.
Delicious in Dungeon.
Which was, again, it all comes around.
Again, it's like poetry, so if they rhyme.
Which, it's a manga and an anime that's inspired by
D&D.
somewhat the author reading the D&D books.
Yeah.
So
I watched. Did you watch Delicious in Dungeon, Matt?
no, I didn't.
I watched some of it. Listen, listeners. I enjoy a jape, a joke, some tomfoolery, as much as the next person. It was not to my taste. And this campaign frame is also not to my taste. But I did appreciate it for what it was, and I'm glad that this is in here. I like that they're not all like super serious, dark, high drama settings. I'm glad that they have one where like the vibe we want is like a fun anime where you eat monsters in a dungeon. I think that's fun. It's not the one I would want to play, but I like that it's in here, and I like it. Again, it shows the flexibility of the system.
Yeah. For someone like me who has not read or watched Delicious in Dungeon, do the characters have a goal besides like keeping themselves fed, or is it just like we got to eat monsters?
I've only made it like a few episodes in, but like one of the main, they're an adventuring party. They're not great at adventuring. One of them gets captured by a dragon or eaten by a dragon. It's a lot of borders on vor sometimes. Anyway, so they're trying to get deeper and deeper in this like infinite dungeon. Again, it's very like meta D&D, but they're having trouble, and then they meet this guy who loves to eat monsters, and he helps them survive. Every episode, he makes like a fantastic dish out of like some a vampire bat or something or other. It's clever, like it's interesting, it's funny. It wasn't entirely to my liking.
Yeah,
it was a little too gonzo
say,
for me, honestly. It was like really like it was very like off the wall at parts, but yeah,
I think if people really love that. And I, as I understand, it was a fairly popular manga and is a very popular anime.
A lot of
this
people
would be a great campaign for people who are fans of that.
It
has some add-on rules for cooking. I feel like these are okay. I think the like campaign frame needs like more like you described in the plot, like someone important to the characters who start off sucking to drive them, because the drive is like, hey, your community's running out of food. I think making it more personal would be way more interesting.
The sort of thing that I like about this and that I would lean on if I were going to run it is the sort of like the Monster Hunter influence, which is where you take bits and pieces of the monsters you defeat to make more powerful weapons or armor or something like that. That's a very gear treadmill type thing, but I find it very pleasant and satisfying. That's why people play Monster Hunter games. So that is kind of like a cool thing. You're using using monster parts to make armor or weapons or potions or something like that. That's neat. I like there's an idea here that is cool. The vibe is not for me, but again, I'm admitting that I think it's cool, even though it's not exactly my thing.
I think this would be a fun campaign. It's a dungeon crawl where you might elide everything but tracking how much food your players have and then setting up big fights with big or weird monsters. And then you go from one to those and then meet the communities that live in the dungeon. Yeah.
I mean, that is the appeal and the fun part of this is that you can just sort of like go wild. You're not quite so bound by verisimilitude. You're chopping monsters up and eating them. Like, just have fun with it. Make stuff up, go wild.
Okay, the next one is Age of Umbra by Matthew Mercer, and This one, let me read the short pitch. In a dying world immersed in relentless shadow and nightmarish monsters, small communities hold fast to the light, hoping those who endure can find a way to save the broken realm before all is lost to darkness.
This one is very grimdark, and I think Critical Role is currently doing, I think, a short campaign in Age of Umbra. I haven't confirmed if it started yet or not, but
yeah, I haven't seen it either.
This is clearly something that is near and dear to the Crit Role family. Matt, what do you think of this one?
I think so I thought the points of light in a really dark world idea that 4th edition D&D had was kind of interesting, but it definitely wasn't dark enough. It didn't, when you read the materials they were putting out, it didn't quite seem that way. This is absolutely dark enough. It's everyone, when you die, everyone becomes like a ghost or a revenant, and it's a bad place to be. It seems like if you want to play a post-apocalyptic fantasy game, this is what you've got. But this one's got that grim dark feel. Both Rob and I love parts of the Dark Sun fantasy series, and we love them because it's a chance to be heroes in a post-apocalyptic fantasy story. And I think this is just kind of that same type of vibe, and that's how I read it.
Yeah, I like this one. Longtime listeners will know that I am a huge fan of the FromSoft games, the Souls series, and what's cool about that is that it's a dying or dead world, and you are both trying to survive, but also trying to either bring an end or a restart to it. You're fighting your way through the grasping remnants of a dying empire, and vibe wise that's really fun for a video game. I really like it. I'm not positive that this is what I would love to do a TTRPG of, but this was definitely
what is the new game that's like Dark Souls that everyone plays?
Oh, are you with Elden Ring?
Elden Ring.
Elden Ring is the same vibe, but a little less grim. I think Elden Ring was more popular because it wasn't quite so dramatically dark, but it's clearly the creator of these games has a thing, and it is an ancient kingdom of fallen giant people, and everything is dark and decaying, and nobody can die.
Mr. Soft,
yeah, Mr. Soft,
John Soft.
But this is cool. I think that there's a lot that you could do in this one. I think that this would be great for it mentions communities, the importance of these small isolated communities. Treating community as a means of survival. I think this would be a really counterintuitively a great game for a smaller scale adventure where you're trying to defend your little village in the mist, or you have to go on a journey to a nearby village to get something important through this dark and twisted wasteland. I think actually a more human, emotionally grounded story would actually be great for Age of Umbra.
Yeah, we've talked about our least favorite type of horror is gothic horror, and I feel like a lot of fantasy either goes gothic horror or just the slapstick horror of that. I feel like OSR games can have a lot of horror in the fantasy genre, but because you're a dwarf getting eaten by a monster, it's more funny if you're a little elf and you get eaten by a monster. But this is a nice attempt to do some grimdark it's still high fantasy. But it's grimdark.
It's an existential horror, right? And that's what's cool, I think, about the Souls games. And what I like about Age of Umbra is it's not you're not being eaten by a mimic, which is horrible, but it's also funny. Yeah.
Okay. Two more quick ones. Next one's Motherboard by McGay Baker, Rowan Hall, and Spencer Stark. This is the techno magic. You're living in computer, and there's robot beasts, and you got to learn the sacred language of the motherboard code.
I could talk about this one for an entire episode. I'm just gonna say that this is so fucking good. It's
pretty cool.
This is so cool. So many good ideas here. The mechanics are neat. I don't even know if you need them, but like they're cool mechanics for like if you want to play Horizon Zero Dawn, if you want to like live in like a fantasy world, but it's actually technology. Your Numenera. This is it. But taken to like a whole new level. And yeah, you're in a giant computer. The computer is a god. You can become a god. You can become a computer. You are a computer. There's a literal like written con language in here that looks like circuits. It shows you how to write in like motherboard or whatever it's called. Hang on, it has a different name.
Code.
Yeah.
KOHD.
You do tech damage instead of magic damage. This is cool. This is a really cool idea. It's well done.
Yeah, everyone, there are these like nodes all over the world that connect to these lines and like data wells. There was the inciting incident is a short while ago. Basically, all the weird robot animals. Some that look like animals, some that look like other things. A lot of them went crazy as a virus spread through the system, and players now have to survive and navigate. Maybe enter the sacred like motherboard data spire to figure out what's going on. It has a cool look. It has a cool vibe. It has a cool set of factions. Yeah, I really love Motherboard, and the even better news is that. I think probably most people on the show know this, but McGay Baker, cancer-free after a tough battle with cancer.
Oh, that's
and
right.
It's great to hear that she is recovered, and super great because she's one of our great TTRPG designers, and it's awesome that this included something by McGay. All right, last one, Colossus of the Drylands, Wild West meets Shadow of the Colossus. This is really cool.
Matt described it perfectly. It's your cowboys, but also there's giant Magitech colossuses in a big, Wild West, and you're gunslinging your way from one end of the Drylands to the other. We talked, a lot of these are, the other four I think are more like amalgamations or collections or inspirations from an aesthetic. This to me feels more like a classic smash two things together. And we've also talked about how much we love smashing two things together. I think if you smash cowboys and giant, walking automatons together, that's great. That's so cool.
And there's a lot going on here in that there's some new rules for like firearms and like these god essences, and then rules for like fighting colossuses. And they give this one a complexity rating of 4. What is simple about this is I love how this gives a example like campaign beat structure to it, where it's like, all right, the players deal with cattle rustlers, and then a new colossus emerge, and then the beat is tracking down where this is, finding out information about its weaknesses, fighting it, and then back to the other beat. Repeat that 9 times, and that's the campaign.
Yeah. And which makes perfect sense. This also comes with examples for building your own Colossus and some example Colossi. Like we've mentioned, each campaign frame comes with a little bit of extra goodies, and there's some really fun ones in this one.
Yeah. Colossus of the Drylands by Carlos Cisco, Rowan Hall, Spencer Tark, and Mike Underwood. Okay, that's all the campaign frames. This also includes a summary of maps for all of the campaigns, summary of all the player abilities. Actually, sorry, the full text of all the player abilities, so you can reference it as the DM. And it's a ton of great handouts. Anyway, that's Daggerheart. We're finally done with it. I liked it.
I liked it too. It's really good. I'm a big fan. If you are not, or you are, and you have thoughts for us, definitely let us know. Write us at dmofnone@gmail.com. You can also hop on our Discord and tell us there, or join our Patreon
If you want to listen to more episodes, patreon.com/Dungeon Master of None. We recently talked about what Dungeon Masters can learn from Baldur's Gate Act 1. So if you want to listen to that episode, head to the link in the show notes.
Thanks for listening, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope that you don't have to go buy it, but like we said, the SRD is available. Check it out. Take a look and tell us what you thought. Appreciate you as always, and whatever you do, keep rolling them dice.